Those nice and big for you. And we shall begin. All right, someone give me a thumbs up if you can see, hopefully, my slide with the big brain. Very good. All right, so welcome everyone to this session. The full title of which, because I love myself a long title, is Mind Matters Improving Your Memory for Singing and Life. You maybe didn't know exactly what to expect when you're coming into this session, and I like the saying that happiness is met expectations. So let me tell you a little bit about this session as we begin. In this session, you should expect a few things. First of all, primarily explanations of several memory techniques. I'm going to do a lot of talking. That's why I asked Julia to have you all make sure that you stay on mute, because I've got a lot of material to cover. And while I'm thinking about that, let me remind you all that this session is being recorded. And so if I'm going too quickly or there's something that you want to stop and noodle on a little bit more, I encourage you afterwards, look at that recording, and you can pause and start and stop as many times as you need to in that recording. So I am pre-apologizing for having a lot of material in this. My aim is to give you all lots and lots of options when it comes to making your memory work for you. You can also, in this session, expect a little bit of additional information for some of these things that have a time or a space requirement. And I'll talk more about what I mean when I say time and space requirements. But you see, I've got these two little icons of a stopwatch and a jauntily running fellow. And that stopwatch is going to be your hint that the thing that I'm talking about at that moment needs a little bit of time. So it's not good to start that memory technique in the moments before you need to perform. That one maybe you need a little bit more lead time on. And similarly, the running man is just your reminder that this is a technique that might need you to move about a little bit. So for me, I often am cramming before a performance when I'm in the car or in backstage or something like that in a small area. But some of the things that we're going to talk about today might require you to move around, move your body, take a walk, that sort of a thing. And so when you see the little running guy, that's just your reminder of what that means. In this session, you can also expect a little bit of demonstrations, not just from me, but from all of you. There's going to be just a little bit of audience participation, not too much. No need to be alarmed. But I do think that it helps sometimes to cement new information or a new idea by doing it, right? And helping our body make that connection and help us remember. So there are going to be a few things where I'm going to say, try this along with me and let's see how it goes. So it's not just going to be me talking this whole time. Finally, you can expect a Q&A. I've left time at the end for your questions and answers. So if you have them throughout, feel free to ask them by throwing them in the chat. We've got two excellent chat monitors keeping tabs on everything that's going on there. If you prefer to ask the question verbally, I would ask you just to wait till the end of the session. We should have some time for you to get those questions, answers, observations, all of your mysteries related to mind and memory. Okay? So if you can work with that, let me continue and tell you a little bit about me, my credentials, why I'm here talking to you about memorization. I am primarily, as you all know me, a member of the collective music team. You may have seen me in sessions or been in a session that I'm running. That is definitely one of the highlights, if not the top highlight for me of pandemic. I don't know about you. That's definitely a very big part of my life, my musical life, certainly. Another part of my musical life I should mention is in real life, I sing in the Library of Congress chorale. I live in the Washington, D.C. area here in the United States, and the Library of Congress has a little employee and alumni chorale, and that's where I get my real life singing experience when we are allowed to do such things. That is where I do it. So that's another important part of my musical life. I also should mention when it comes to memory and memorization sorts of things, my credentials in that I am a member of Mensa. I'm a lifetime member of Mensa. I'm also a very avid quizzer. I am ranked 320th in the world, I think, as of this year's World Quizzing Championships. So I love memorizing lists of cities and people's names and dates and facts and figures. And we're not going to do any of that too much in this session. No worries. I'm not going to ask you what the capital of Louisiana is. But I have had to memorize many things in my lifetime, and I'm hoping that some of the things I have picked up along the way can help you. Okay. One more thing to know about me, sort of in this memorization area, is I have been on a number of game shows. I've got a picture of a few of them here. This is obviously a situation, the type of show that I go on is a quiz show where you need to be able to retain and recall a lot of information, often under pressure with people watching you. And so I'm hoping that the techniques that I'm going to present, which have been tried in those high pressure situations, will be similarly helpful to you, even if you're in a low pressure memorization situation. Okay, so those are the things that I am. Let me also take a brief moment to just for the record state one thing that I am not, and that is a doctor. So please don't construe anything in this session as medical advice. Okay, I am here telling you as a layperson, as a non-doctor, some things that have helped me memorize information in different situations, and I'm hopeful that some of these things will work for you. Maybe all of them won't, and that's okay. I would like you, please, to remember that this session is all about helping you and your brain make connections, okay? I'm going to give you techniques that help you take the thing that you are trying to memorize, whether it's a song or a poem or a speech or a whatever, and add something to it that gives your brain a little extra oomph, a little extra connection, a little extra hook to remember it later on when you need to remember it. But as all of our brains operate differently, and there's no right way for a brain to work and no wrong way for a brain to work, your mileage may vary when it comes to these techniques. Don't get frustrated if something that I talk you through makes absolutely no sense. That's okay. My hope in giving you a wide variety, a number of techniques, is that you might find one or two things that'll help you out in a pinch, okay? So without further ado, then, let's start going into some of these techniques and some of these ideas. And I'm actually a little amused to say that the first one is a bit of bonus content. When I was putting together my list, I realized that as members of the collective choir and attendees of Collective College, we're already doing my number one recommended technique already, and that is set it to music. When people ask me how to memorize something particularly tricky, I'll tell them sing it. Sing the text to a tune, and that can be a real tune or just a little jingle that you make up. How many of us still remember songs we learned years ago or commercial jingles that we haven't seen for decades? We remember that because the music, when connected to the text, dives a little deeper into our subconscious, okay? Think about when you are a child, or when you have a child, and one of the first things that you want to teach them is the alphabet. What do? We take the letters of the alphabet and we say, you know that song, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star? You are going to use that song to help you learn the 26 letters of the English alphabet. Okay, and I'm sure many, if not all of you, could perhaps still sing that alphabet song today, even though you first learned it a long time ago. Okay, it's not just formal, official educational things like that, though. I would challenge you the next time you're trying to remember something mundane like a shopping list. Sing it to a song. I've got a little example of a list here: milk, eggs, butter, bread, and soap. Okay? Same kind of idea. And that's a silly little example and a tune that we're all very familiar with. But make up your own tune: milk, eggs, butter, bread, and soap. Okay? So that if you're like me and you forget to take the piece of paper, or it doesn't make it into the store with you, you're sitting in the aisle and you're thinking, what was it that I needed? You can think back, oh, wait a minute, I had a song for that. Okay? So the next time you've got information to memorize, whatever type of information it is, consider setting it to music. Now, like I said, with the Collective College, we are pros at this already, right? We are memorizing things that are set to music. And I know because it's presented to us as a song, you don't realize how impressive it is what you're doing. Let me speak to the baritones in the session, if we have any. Baritones, I'm going to bring up the baritone part, the words to the baritone part. And you might not be able to read it. You don't need to read it. My point with bringing up these words is that look at all of these words, everybody. This is a lot of words. And if I just handed you these words written on a piece of paper, your eyes might glaze over a little bit. But because it was handed to you with a tune alongside of it, and maybe a tune that you had heard already, your brain is starting to make those extra connections to say, oh, I'm going to be able to memorize, really to memorize what is a lot of words, okay? So Technique number 0, because I love a numbered list, but I realize this isn't quite number 1. Technique number 0 is setting it to music. Okay, let's talk about another technique that might work for you, and I call that technique chunking. What I mean by chunking is the idea of breaking the text into sections. When you're presented with a big amount of information, try to turn it into more manageable pieces. There's that saying of, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And that's exactly what we're doing here. We are taking that big thing and turning it into more digestible pieces. Okay, let me give you an example to make this a little more concrete. I've got a version of this example for my UK friends and a version of this example for my US friends. So what I've just brought up here, long series of numbers, of digits, a big number. And you might look at this, if I said to you, I need you to memorize this very quickly, you would say, I can't do it. I have no idea. This means nothing to me. I don't know if I could come up with a song for this number. No, no thank you at all. Okay? That's understandable. But if you were to look at this and use the chunking technique, let me show you how you might do that. And maybe these numbers become a bit more recognizable when we break them into groups of 3 or 4 digits, when we maybe put in some punctuation and some spaces, okay? These are phone numbers, okay? And I know that we don't memorize phone numbers as much as we used to because of technology, but you know, back in the day, you had a lot of phone numbers memorized, and you memorized them by using the chunking technique. Okay, long numbers often get chunked. Another example are credit cards, and I'm not going to make a value judgment on whether or not it's good to have your credit card number memorized, but I will say the next time you're looking at a credit card, notice how the numbers are chunked. They're grouped into digits. In the case of this Visa, we're looking at 4 groups of 4 digits. And whether or not that is a conscious technique on the part of the card issuer to help you memorize it, it certainly is a good demonstration of chunking. Okay, so that is an additional technique for you to have in the toolkit. Again, it might not work for you or might not work in every situation, but I want you to have it so that should you need it, you've got it at the ready. In the terms of the collective college song, a good example of how chunking works, I'm going to talk to my leads now. So leads, this is our part for Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me. Now, when you initially got this part, you're looking at 2 pages of music, a couple dozen lines, hundreds of notes, lots of words. There's a lot going on here. And it's easy for your brain to start getting overwhelmed at the amount that you're going to have to learn. But if you took the chunking technique to this song, you might say, all right, I'm going to start at the beginning. We've got some introduction, and then we've got a verse, and I've highlighted that verse on my music in yellow. Okay, so that's verse 1. Then after we finish singing the verse, we go into the chorus here in green. Okay, so I've got a chunk that is the first verse, and then I've got a chunk that is the chorus. Okay, continuing on in my music, now we've got a second verse. I've put that in blue on mine. So this is our third chunk. We've got another bit of verse singing. And then it looks like at measure 67, we go into another chorus, and I've put it in green again. And I know it's not exactly the same as the first chorus, but it's very similar, okay? And I hope that you can see here how with this song, we've taken that 2 pages of hundreds of notes and broken it down into primarily 4 chunks, 2 of which are substantially similar. And so don't think about, I have to memorize 2 pages. Think about, I've got to memorize 4 chunks and then tackle them 1 chunk at a time. Again, we're eating that elephant 1 bite at a time, okay? So that's chunking in the context of the collective college song, okay? So we've hit 2 techniques now. I want to recap. We've talked about setting it to music, right? The alphabet song, or the shopping list song, as I shall now call it. We also talked about chunking and how long strings of information or long strings of numbers or long strings of whatever can be broken down into more digestible pieces. That's 2. Let me tell you about another tool for your toolkit, and that is something called mnemonics. Mnemonics is a very fancy, funnily spelled word that just means finding patterns to help you remember, okay? Let me give you an example of a pattern that you might use, a mnemonic you might use or have used to retain information. Got a picture of a rainbow here with the letters underneath it that spell Roy G. Biv. So maybe you learned Roy G. Biv. Maybe you learned the saying Richard of York gave battle in vain. But both of those are mnemonics to help us remember what? Colors of the rainbow, right? Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Instead of telling children to memorize those colors, we say memorize Roy G. Biv or memorize Richard of York gave battle in vain and use that mnemonic to help you remember the information. Okay, let's look at a musical example. Not the collective college example yet, but let's look at a musical example from a previous collective song. Some of you might remember we had a song a little while ago called What Can I Say? And there was a section in there that had the words no matter the place, no matter the age, whatever the time, whatever the stage. And as we were all working on this, many people were struggling with the order of those words place, age, time, and stage. And we were getting them all mixed up, all singing them in the wrong order, which is not ideal for a performance from any sort of choir, okay? But then some singers realized, hey, wait a minute. If you look at those trouble words and take the first letter of each one, so for place, that's a P, for age, that's an A, for time, you look at the T, and for S, you look at, or for time, you look at the T, and for stage, you look at the S. They spell out the word PATS. And that mnemonic we used as you approach that section in the song. Instead of getting worried about, oh no, what word comes first? All you had to think of was the mnemonic PATS. And you realized, oh, the order is place, age, time, and stage. Okay? So that's a musical example from a collective choir song of the past. Let me talk you through an example that we might use for our current song. Okay? So I'm going to bring up the lead part once again. It's helpful for mnemonics because it has lots of words. This is a section of the song, the chorus section of the lead part. And if I were looking at this and trying to assign a mnemonic, here's how I might do it. And again, you might do it differently. That's perfectly fine. Do it in the way that makes sense to you. But the way that I would do it, and that makes most sense to me, is I would look at these 4 lines. And instead of saying, oh, I'm never going to get these in the right order, I'm going to say, how can I give my brain a pattern to help me remember them in the right order? So for me, I look at that first line, don't let the sun go down on me yet, and I see D words. The D words stick out to me. And so I'm going to tell myself, brain, that first line is the D line, okay? Then I'm going to look down at the second line, and for me, when I read that second line, the words that stick out to me are the S words, okay? So I'm going to tell myself, brain, line number 2 is the S line. I'm going to do the similar kind of a thing for lines 3 and 4. And line 3, when I look at that, for me, the words that stick out are the F words. Those are the ones that I find very vivid and memorable. And so to me, line 3 is the F line. And for line 4, the words that stick out to me, the primary word that sticks out to me is that L of losing. And so I tell myself, brain, that line is the L line. Okay, so I've got a D line, an S line, an F line, and an L line. And I would remember those by just assigning a little silly phrase to them. And so in my, because disciple isn't really a word, but in my mind, I might say something like daily singing for life. Daily singing for life is going to give me DSFL, and that is going to help me remember those 4 lines of the song. Okay, so that's an example of a mnemonic in action for our collective college song. Look for those patterns, look for those shortcuts, help your brain draw those connections. Okay, so let's recap again. We have gone through 3 techniques so far. We talked about setting it to music, we talked about chunking, we talked about mnemonics. You all are doing great. Let's continue ahead to the next technique, which features our jaunty running fellow, and it's something I call gesture linking, which is just a term that I made up essentially for choreography or talking with your hands. And I want to make sure that I'm clear here that when I'm talking about choreography for the next few moments, I mean learning choreography, not performance choreography. So many of you know in your choirs you've got choreographed moves that are artistic and expressive and aid your performance of the song. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about using gestures, even if they're silly, to help you remember what the information is that you are trying to remember. Okay, so let's start with a real world example. Let's bring that shopping list back. Okay, remember our shopping list from a few slides ago? Well, here it is again. And if this were my shopping list and I was going to the store and worried I'd lose that piece of paper en route, I might look at these items and say, what's a gesture? What are some motions that I can do to give my body a physical cue, give my brain a physical cue to help that information stick? So for me, I might look at these items and say, all right, for milk, I'm going to pretend like I'm milking a cow, right? That's going to remind me that I need milk. You could say, I'm going to pretend I'm drinking a big glass of milk. That's my milk reminder. Then I'm going to look at the list and say eggs. I'm going to do a big goose egg with my hands, and that's going to be my reminder. Oh, I need to get eggs when I'm at the store. Looking back at the list, I see butter and bread. I might do a motion like this, buttering a slice of bread. That's going to remind me that I need butter and that I need bread. And then looking at that list again, the last one is soap. Why don't you all do this one with me? Give me your best soap. What would you do to remind yourself that you need soap? Would you do maybe scrubbing the arms, washing the hands, maybe washing a dish, whatever it is for you that would remind you you need soap? Okay, hang on to that. It might come in handy later, but you get the idea, right? They don't have to make sense only to you, right? Don't worry about if you look silly. You're doing this in your own home as you're getting this information down. But the whole point of it is to give your brain a little something extra to spark it when you're in the aisle at the grocery store and need to figure out, what is it that I needed? You can think about whatever your gestures were to help you remember what those items were on your shopping list. Okay, so that's a real world example. Let's talk about a collective college music example. I don't want the tenors and the basses to feel left out, so I'm going to talk to you now. Tenors, you first. This is a section of the collective college song of your part, okay? And in this one, if I'm doing my learning choreography, and again, this isn't performance choreography, we're not going to do this in the performance session, but when I'm trying to learn this particular section of this part, I'm going to look for words that I find particularly evocative or key to that line. And I'm going to do some of my silly gestures, okay? So in this first line of the tenor part, I see the word pictures, okay? So I might do something like a camera, okay? You all can imagine what you might do for pictures, whether you're taking a picture or painting a picture, whatever that picture gesture would be. That's your mind's hook to remember that first line that starts all my pictures, okay? Looking down to the next line of the tenor part, I see the word tired, okay? So I might, if I were trying to remember that the second line starts, I'm growing tired, do a gesture of sleeping or a gesture that reminds me of being tired or sleep, okay? That's my brain's hook to remember that the second line is the one that starts, I'm growing tired, okay? Looking down to the next line, the last line we've got in this little excerpt, I see the word ladder, okay? So I'm going to imagine climbing a ladder. That's my note to myself that that third line includes the idea of on the ladder of my life. And so when I'm coming up to this section in my own practice, and I try to think, what is the order of those things? Oh, I know. It was first the one about pictures, then there was the line about tired, and then there was the line about the ladder, right? Okay, and again, in performance, I'm not going to be doing any of those things, but when I'm learning, those motions that get my body going in addition to my brain, give my brain those extra connections to retain the material, okay? Now I know that the basses may be thinking, well, yes, but we never have any words, so how are we supposed to act out our part? Well, basses, I'm glad you asked. Let me bring up an excerpt of the bass part, and this applies to all parts who find themselves with more percussive accompaniment sorts of sounds that aren't words. What do you do when you're gesture linking? Well, when I'm gesture linking to a part like this, not a bass part because I'm only an aspirational bass in my dreams, but what I might do is look for changes either in dynamic or in pitch and act those out with what I call my diva fingers, right? Going up or going down. Okay, so in this bass part, they've got a lovely da ba da ba dum run, going down the fifth, right? So when I'm getting to that part, I would probably do a big da ba dum just to remind myself that at that point in the song, I need to remember to do a big going downward. And similarly, if it were a run going up, I do one of these, okay? And if you see me in a notes, words, breath session or a musical memory session doing something like this, I'm often telling myself, get loud or get quiet or go up the scale. Again, it's just another way to cue my body to remember, hey, this is what we're doing right now, brain. Don't forget, make that connection, okay? So that's gesture linking, choreography for learning, adding motion to the information to help you retain, hopefully retain and recall it a little bit better, okay? So to recap what we've done so far, we talked about setting it to music, we talked about chunking, we talked about mnemonic patterns, we just got done talking about gesture linking. You guys are doing great. The next one that I would like to present to you also has a little running man, and this one is take a walk. And it's honestly as simple as that. I would encourage you to listen to the text, that thing that you are trying to memorize, during a mindless trip. Now, what do I mean by mindless? So, an example of a mindless trip would be a walk around the neighborhood. If you are walking the dogs or you just like to go for a daily walk, it's something that you're comfortable doing, you're familiar with where you're going. You don't need to really think about where do I turn left or where am I. You can let your body just kind of go on routine while your brain can be engaged in listening to the song or the speech or whatever it is you're trying to memorize, okay? Let's take a look at this. I've got a picture here of a woman on a train because for those of us who are commuters into an office, this is one of my favorite times to memorize information. When I'm sitting on a train or when I'm sitting on a bus, I've got that information coming in through my headphones to just really get it to sink into my brain while my body is just kind of elsewhere. I'm not needing to think about where my body is going and what my body is doing, and so I can let my brain focus on the information I am trying to learn. I should point out that a trip doesn't necessarily need to be from here to there. Another mindless trip that I like to take, not as often as I should, is cleaning the house. So when I am washing the dishes, folding the laundry, vacuuming is in the picture here, I will put that information in my ears. I'll have that collective song going over and over so that while my body is occupied in these mindless tasks, I don't have to be mindless because my brain is occupied in listening to that material and letting it seep in. And I will find sometimes that when I am listening to the collective college song while doing the dishes, for example, I will remember later on, oh yeah, when I got to the first chorus, that's when I was washing out my Chicago mug or whatever, because your brain is trying to make those connections naturally. And so it is linking up your physical activity and your mental activity, okay? And again, this is all a way to make connections and links, okay? So remember, let's recap again. We've got set it to music. We have talked about chunking. We talked about mnemonics. We talked about gesture linking. We talked about taking a walk, okay? So far, hopefully, you've got a number of these different techniques. Maybe one or two is piquing your interest a little more than the others. That is perfectly fine. That's exactly the point of it, okay? If none of these are good for you so far, let's try something else on for size. Let me introduce you to a technique that I call visualization. You see the stopwatch here. This one takes a little bit of time. So we are going to take a little bit of time in this session right now to try visualization. Visualization is the technique of building what's known in the memorization field as a memory palace. And you fill that memory palace with things from the text, okay? Now I'm going to ask you to participate with me on this one. It takes a little bit of time, but I think it's very instructive to actually do it, okay? So in order to build a memory palace, I need you to think of a building that you know very, very well. It might be your home, it might be your childhood home, it could be your church, the place you work, the school that you went to for many years. Okay, you get the idea. I want you to think of a structure that has you're intimately familiar with, and that you can move about from place to place. So it can't just be, your shed in the garden, because I need you to be able to move within this building from room to room, or from room to outside to the porch, to that kind of a thing, okay? Because we're going to travel mentally to different places in this building, okay? So if you've got your memory palace, and I'm going to bring my little picture of a memory palace up here. You've got your memory palace in your mind. You're envisioning that building, okay? And I want you to get to the front door or the front entrance of that building, okay? I want you to, and if you need to close your eyes to do this, that's okay. There's nothing you'll need to look at on the slide if you don't want to. So feel free to close your eyes. Imagine yourself at the front door of your memory palace, of that building that you know very well, okay? And I am going to read some words from our collective college song, and I'm going to give you some instructions on how to fill your memory palace. All right, so go ahead and open the front door of whatever your memory palace is, and I want you to walk into the first room, the first entrance room, or whatever the first room is, okay? Are you in that front room, in that first room? Okay. The first words that we're going to think about from our song are, I can't light no more of your darkness. In this first room, I want you to imagine a giant light bulb, okay? It's really big. It's as tall as a person. It's a big light bulb just resting in the corner of that room, okay? That is our reminder of the word light. All right, once you've placed that light bulb in the corner of the first room, I want you to walk to the next room or the next area in that memory palace. All right, once you're there in that next room, once you've placed yourself in room number 2, I'm going to tell you the next words that we're working on, and they are, all my pictures seem to fade to black and white. In this room that you are in now in your memory palace, I want you to cover all of the walls and the floor and the ceiling in photographs, okay? Just blanketed everywhere. Maybe they're hanging from the ceiling in addition to being pasted on the ceiling. Everywhere in this room, there are photographs, okay? Once you've finished furnituring that room full of photographs everywhere on every available surface, I want you to step out of that room and into room number 3, okay? So move to a different part of your memory palace, move into that next room. And the words here that I'd like you to work on are, I'm growing tired and time stands still before me, okay? So in the room that you are now in, I would like you to imagine a big clock with legs, okay? And that clock with legs is standing perfectly still in this room, and that's the only thing in this room. I want you to focus on that clock with legs. I know that's strange. And the fact that he's standing stock still, okay? All right, once you've got that clock is placed there, again, standing perfectly still. Walk out of that room and into the next room or into the next area, okay? All right, once you've arrived in that next room, the words for this room are, frozen here on the ladder of my life. And so in this room, no mystery, I'd like you to place a ladder, and it is up to you whether it is a tall ladder or a short ladder, whether it's made of wood or metal, whether it's yellow or brown. I want you to imagine a ladder and have it in that room, okay? That is our memory aid for ladder of my life. All right, continuing on through the memory palace, go ahead and step into the next room or the next area. And in this room, we are going to work on the words, too late to save myself from falling. So in this room, I'd like you to imagine falling. Maybe there's a set of stairs and you can see something that has fallen down the stairs, a toy or a ball. Maybe there's a table and something fell off the table. But I want you to imagine something in that room that makes you think of falling. All right, once you have placed that item or items in that room, go ahead and step into the next room. Okay, we've got a few more, just a few more. In this next room, the words that we need to work on are I took a chance and changed your way of life. Okay, so in this room, I'd like you to imagine taking a chance. Maybe there's some people playing a card game at a table with the cards and the chips and their snacks and their drinks. Maybe it's people playing a slot machine. Maybe it's people scratching lottery tickets, whatever you can think of that to you connotes the idea of taking a chance. That's what I want you to put in this room. All right, once you've placed those things or people or whatever, taking a chance in the room, step into the next room, please. And once you find yourself in that next room, I want you to think about the words, but you misread my meaning when I met you. And what I would like you to do in this room for the word misread is to imagine a big book, maybe the size of an encyclopedia or a dictionary, with a big red X on the cover. Okay, big red X. That's going to be our memory aid for the word misread. Okay, so in that room, the thing that we focus on is the big book with the big red X on the cover. All right. And now I'd like you to move into the final room that we are going to visit on this trip, that final room or that final area of our memory palace. And in this room, we need to work on the words closed the door and left me blinded by the light. And so in this room, if you could, please place a door getting closed or already closed or something that makes you think of closing a door. Okay? Now, go ahead and open your eyes if they are closed. If they're open, keep them open. Okay, so what we have just done in that exercise is built a memory palace. As you see, it takes a little bit of time and thought, but hopefully if you do this in the future, you've now got a little bit of idea of how it goes. And how I'd like to test our memory palaces is we're going to take a journey through them and recall how those items, the sillier the better, in my opinion, help us remember what we need to remember. So I'd like you one more time to close your eyes. And if you don't mind, I want everyone to close their eyes this time, whether or not you were doing it before. All I'm going to do is read to you the words from the song that we just used to populate our memory palace. And I want you in your mind to see your memory palace, walk through the rooms, and see the items that were in each of those spaces. Okay, so here we begin. You're at the front door. You're at the front door of your memory palace. Walk into that first room, and here we begin. I can't light no more of your darkness. All my pictures seem to fade to black and white. I'm growing tired and time stands still before me, frozen here on the ladder of my life. Too late to save myself from falling. I took a chance and changed your way of life, but you misread my meaning when I met you, closed the door, and left me blinded by the light. All right, open your eyes. Okay, so you've just taken a little bit of a trip through your first ever memory palace. And did you see the giant light bulb and the clock with legs, the people playing poker, or the book with the big red X on the cover? Okay, those were all little cues to remind yourself of what the words are in that song. Okay, and so similarly, when you're memorizing a speech or a list of information, imagine that memory palace and fill it with items. And like I said, the sillier the better, the more memorable, in my opinion, to help you remember what those things are. And I mean, if you want to populate your memory palace with your shopping list items, you know what? That might work too. Again, whatever works for you. That's the whole point of the memory palace and of the visualization. All right. So that was a long one. Let's remember what we have covered so far. We talked about setting the information to music. We talked about chunking, breaking it down. We talked about mnemonics, looking for the patterns. We talked about gesture linking, that choreography for learning. We talked about taking a walk and listening to the material as we do mindless things. And then we just now took a long walk through our memory palaces and using the technique of visualization. Okay? So we're almost there. I want to tell you that you have already been practicing the next and final technique, and that is repetition. Repetition, repetition, repetition. All right? You may have in school, if you were naughty, or even if you weren't, had to do the exercise of writing something over and over and over and over and over. Okay? Now, in addition to that being just a terrible punishment, the science behind it is that the more we do something, the more permanent it becomes, whether that is something that we are doing physically or something that we are doing mentally. Okay? I know there's a saying that says practice makes perfect. I don't know about that, but I do think that practice makes permanent. Okay? And so when you need to memorize a song or some text, repeat it over and over again. In this session, I have presented to you some information, and I have tried my best to repeat it over and over again to you so that if you need to recall it later, you could remember, oh, mnemonics, or oh, gesture linking, some of those things. Okay, you get the idea. And let me mention here that it's helpful to be mindful of whether you are an audio learner or a visual learner. So if you're a visual learner, you prefer or remember things that you see. So I would encourage visual learners to use things like flashcards or to look at the material, read the material over and over in the repetition technique. If you are a audio listener, you remember what you hear much better than what you see, then that's when you listen. Okay, that's when you listen to that audio guide track over and over again. That's when you get the book on tape or record someone reading the speech that you are trying to memorize and listen to that over and over and over. And honestly, if you are able to tolerate it, a good practice is to do them both. So look at the sheet music while you are listening to the guide track, for example, or doing other of the techniques. Again, we're all about making connections when we're memorizing something, especially under a short time. And so use multiple techniques at once, use all of the resources available to you. That's why the collective does such a, I think, wonderful job. And it's not me that's putting it together, but the people who put together the resources to learn songs do all sorts of different kinds of resources because some of them are more useful to each of us than others because again our brains all work differently, so take advantage of what you can. And if there isn't a learning resource for that thing that you are working on, create it, write it out, make a set of flashcards, record someone reading the thing and listen to it. Use the ideas and the options and the different ways of learning to your advantage. Okay, so repeat, repeat, repeat. And let's do it one more time since I can't help myself to repeat. What are the sessions we've learned, or what are the techniques we've learned? And this is all of them now. So let's do a big recap, the final recap. So we talked about the bonus technique at the beginning of setting it to music, right? That alphabet song, making up a song, commercial jingles, whatever, to help cement those connections in our mind with that information. Okay. After that, we talked about chunking, taking something that seems very big and unmanageable and unlearnable and breaking it down into littler bits. Okay. After that, we then talked about mnemonics. Find the pattern, find the word or the saying or the whatever that can help you remember the things, especially if they need to be in a particular order. Use that mnemonic to your advantage. We talked about gesture linking, choreography for learning. Remember, I had my milk, I had eggs. We talked about butter and bread. And oh, I seem to have covered up the picture here. Show me if you remember, what was that final item on the shopping list? Did you have a something? I see a few people scrubbing, a few people washing. Yes, yes, indeed. Very good. Well done, all of you. That last thing on the list was soap. So you passed. Pop quiz, you passed. Okay, use those silly actions, they may be, but use them to help you remember what is happening in the text. Okay, we talked about taking a walk and during a mindless trip, exposing yourself to the material, whatever it is. We spent quite some time building our memory palaces, walking through them, and using the items within to guide us to what the material is. So do that if you have, especially if you have time and things that really need to be done in a particular order. That's a great technique for that. And then last but certainly not least, we repeated, we repeated, we repeated, we repeated, we repeated, we repeated, and we allowed practice to make hopefully permanent with that material. Okay, so that is everything that I had pre-prepared for you. I know it's a lot, so if you need to refer to that recording afterwards, please do. But at this point, I do want to, I hope we've saved just a little bit of time for questions. So I'm gonna, I think, throw back to Julia, at least to start us off into the Q&A. Are there any questions?
Chat monitors, are there any questions that have come up during the session? Over to you.
Well, I think everybody was so engaged in that session that there's not been very much going. But there was one question, Heather, from Michael. Would it be useful, Heather, to put a song on while you have a sleep or perhaps a nap? Would that subliminal learning technique work? You're muted, Heather. Heather, you're muted.
Shame on me. I think it certainly can. I think for some people, that idea of having it going while you sleep is helpful. I have found for me personally, what I do in that vein is if I'm working on material, I will look at it right before I go to bed. So I don't know that my brain while I'm sleeping is necessarily going to be actively engaged with something that I would be hearing. So I don't listen to things while I sleep. But I definitely feel that when I look at something right before I go to bed, my subconscious mulls it over a little bit while I am sleeping. So that's the closest that I get to that sort of memorization technique. It certainly works well for some people. They'll swear by it. For me personally, I find that I need to be conscious or somewhat conscious and engaged in the information. And then when my brain is off, when I'm sleeping, it's perhaps mulling it over, but I'm not counting on it while I'm sleeping to do any work. So good question.
And that's all that went in the, apart from very positive comments, that's all the questions that were in the chat. So
All right. Well, I mean, you all are very kind. I certainly appreciate everyone's time. I know it was a lot to throw at you, but hopefully, again, one or two bits or pieces here will come in handy for you. And if they don't, please don't get frustrated. Again, everyone's brain is a little different, but I am here to give you tools to have in your toolkit so that should you need them, you are aware and they are available to you. So thank you all so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Heather, there's a hand
Yeah.
up. Linda Smith's got her hand up.
Oh, Linda.
Hi, I'm finding it incredibly difficult not singing the I when I can hear, when we've got to sing you instead of I, because I can hear it. Is there anything I can do to make myself sing you instead of I?
The thing that I will explain the thing that I do, and that is because I'm a visual learner, I do a lot of score marking. And so for me, I have that part with a big note, a big circle, big highlighted bold letters with what the right word is. I also find that section particularly challenging. I don't think you're alone. And the best that I can say is to try to block out what you're hearing at that instant, just that little instant if you can, and just instead focus on what you are saying, which is the correct word. That's definitely a very tricky challenge to try to distinguish between what is coming in your ears and what is coming out of your mouth. So you're certainly not alone. Take comfort in that. But do, if you can, visual cues or some other kind of trick to remember in that just little instance, this is the one time where we're not going to listen to what Simon is saying, but we are instead going to go with what is on the score. So I don't have a great fail-safe trick for that one, but it's definitely a challenge for me too.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Haley?
Yes. I was just thinking of a thing that when we were doing the memory palace, I was actually going through like the motions of closing the door, because that's actually the sound of the door closing helps me remember, oh, close the door. Okay. I'm a sound learner, I guess. No?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, audio learners are definitely a type of learner. And yeah, if you can do a little bit of adding in audio cues or doing the gesture linking of physically making the motion of closing a door.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
I just can't do that on the video.
Yes, it's practice choreography and definitely something you want to do in advance. You might not want to be doing your practice choreography as you're on the risers waiting for the conductor to cue you in, but definitely if you have the opportunity to do it,
Yeah,
something
it
to
would look a
do.
little silly.
Yeah, thank you, Haley. Michael Rowe?
Hi, Heather. You was doing your visualization. I thought I'd share this with you because I picked a really bad place to. I didn't think of a house. I thought of a church. So I thought one of my favourite places from the past was a Swedish church. So literally, like I go to the front of the house for the I can't light part. Then I go through that room with the photographs, which was Ava's lesson room, and literally there was all photographs up there anyway, which was really helpful. And then after that, I'm growing tired. The clock with the legs, strangely enough, was the kitchen, and there is a clock in the kitchen, and people running around all over the place. So that was really strong memory for me. Then I go to the library, believe it or not, and that was ideal for Frozen here on the ladder of my life because there's a literally they could put a ladder there to get to the different shelves, and then finally going through to the hallway, and there's a notice board up there. And I thought at the time, well, this is not going to work. And then I remembered there's 2 or 3 steps just to the right of that if you're not careful, you will trip. And then there's a door after that, which is like a staff area where like when we volunteer to help out for the charity Christmas fair, the Yule Marketing. And then in there, they actually had a pack of cards, which I can't believe. Like there's like a toilet in there, and there's like a changing area in there. And then the last one's just going to make you laugh. The last 2 were strange. But if I walk back from there and I walk down the corridor, the next place I get to is actually the male toilets. So you're talking about the big book. So the visualization is sitting on the toilet reading the book in the loo. Then coming back from out there, going upstairs is the church area. So there's like the chapel, like where we'd actually go to, like for the service, because we had to go for the service when I was learning Swedish. So literally going that and blinded by the light. Well, that's God's light. So that's such a strong, vivid image, like But I thought I'd like to share that with you because maybe it'll help other people. I don't know.
Well, there you go. Yeah, the memory palace is a little involved, and I appreciate that yours worked out perfectly like that. For some people, maybe it didn't. The building that you had chosen didn't work out quite so well, and I sprung that one on you without telling you in advance what the requirements would be. But now that you all know how the memory palace works, if you choose to use it in the future, you've got a little bit better idea of, I need a building with a lot of rooms because I'm going to be putting stuff in those rooms. So now you know. All right. Thank you, Michael. Anybody else? Okay. Is there a comment in the chat? Oh, yep, Tina, we're working to get the app back on. People are looking into whatever is wrong with it. So you all know, stay tuned for more on the app. So, all right. Well, then, thank you all so much for your time. Enjoy your collective college sessions. I'll see you in the next one, wherever that may be. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.